this very timely subject of open educational resources. Our first speaker will speak on the topic of OERs in higher education, considerations for Caribbean leaders. And this session will be presented by Beverly Wood of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus in Barbados. She will be followed next by Tashfeen Ahmad of the University of the West Indies, Mona campus in Jamaica, and he will be presenting on Embrace Technologies, Increase Communication. Now moving along to our session, please help me welcome Beverly Wood and Tashfeen Ahmad. First, let me introduce Beverly. Beverly A. Wood is a librarian and currently officer in charge of the Faculty of Law Library, the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. She has been employed at the campus since 2003. Beverly's research interests include scholarly communication, access to information, and information-seeking behavior, as well as Caribbean literature and culture. Though her first time attending and presenting at ACHEA, she assisted with both the 2015 and 2016 conferences. Please let's welcome Beverly for her presentation.
Good morning to you. Thank you for coming to this session. I appreciate you being here. I want to talk a bit about open education resources and the implications for the Caribbean higher education institutions and some considerations for our leaders. Higher education in the Caribbean is becoming increasingly competitive. Right. Higher education in the Caribbean is becoming increasingly competitive. There's several players entering the Caribbean market, and this is making it quite a challenge for us to hold on to our niche markets. We find that more established higher education institutions are now competing with institutions globally for students, resources, and staff. Indeed, within the Caribbean, regional institutions are competing with each other for students, one important criteria in the market. In order to remain competitive, to maximize scarce resources and maintain sustainability, regional higher education institutions must align their strategic plans to the human capital development needs of the various stakeholder governments, their regional employers, and among other things, they must develop new courses and revamp older courses to suit the needs of the more global workforce. Additionally, one of the things that must be done is reducing the overall costs to students. This must remain low or within reach in order to capitalize on student intake. One of the things that has been very prevalent is very much discussed recently has been the rising cost of education, and particularly to students. It is a significant challenge for students to remain in these institutions as the cost of education for them continues to rise. And this leads to a number of issues. A significant portion of this cost to students rests in resources needed for their studies. Open education resources is open education resources are creating a significant buzz in the educational landscape internationally. These resources are considered one of the means by which students might be able to remain in higher education. Open education resources are resources available freely for anyone, students, educators, to use in formal or informal learning environment without the usual copyright and licensing restrictions associated with traditional output. Open education resources can include books, journals, videos, music, courses, syllabi, lectures, lesson plans, and so on. So they run a large gamut. Perhaps one of the more well-known of open education resources would be MOOCs. And we know very well of Coursera. You would know also of MIT's Open Coursework Initiative, and so on. But one of the more underlying these resources is the issue of copyright. And unlike traditional copyright, unlike the traditional copyright plans, copyright law with all rights reserved settings, there is the Creative Commons licenses. These licenses assure that the owner of the work is attributed for the work. However, under these licenses, permission is given for copying, distribution, editing, remixing, and enhancing of the work. Creative Commons license is a simple, standardized way of permitting one to use resources in open education environment for, like I said, copying, distributing, editing, remixing, and enhancing. There are six of these licenses, and the most accommodating of that one simply says, just attribute the work. Just say that I created this book. The most restrictive one says that it allows only for you to share the work, but you can make no changes, you cannot commercialize it, and you cannot make any derivatives from it. Within the first license, the attribution license, and the last one, the attribution non-commercial no derivatives license, you are able to share, you're able to reuse and distribute, you're able to do all these things except for commercial enterprises. You're able to adapt and credit and share and make these resources available to anyone. And these are important considerations when we consider how open education resources might be used in higher education. As I said, these OERs could be several things. They could be books, they could be journals, they could be music, they could be syllabi, they could be lectures and lesson plans and so on. One of the most touted benefits of open education resources is their contribution to making education more equitable and accessible. And that has been a challenge within the Caribbean, making education accessible and equitable within the Caribbean. Within the higher education context, particularly as it relates to resources made available to students, these can reduce the impact on students and student achievement. There are several challenges to the use of open education resources in Caribbean higher education. One of the things that has been raised in the research by Morris is that there's a lack of awareness of these resources. Many persons consider that the traditional resources used in our classrooms are sufficient. Many do not wish to deviate from these and continue to perpetuate the belief that printed, commercially published resources are the way to go. There's also the reluctance to use these resources. There's a lot of skepticism related to this. And this skepticism of the peer review, particularly of the resources. How are these resources created? Are they peer reviewed? We lend a lot of credence to the whole notion of peer review, and that impacts the perceptions of quality. What is the quality? Are these resources quality? Are they quality resources? So questions of quality are raised, and there's a challenge with accepting these resources with the concept of quality being an unknown entity. Another challenge is the belief that open education resources that do exist are not culturally relevant. The adaptation and remixing of open education resources suggests that this can be overcome. However, unless we engage in the creation of open education resources, the notion of cultural relevance will remain. When I speak about cultural relevance, I'm speaking about whether or not, for instance, a textbook, and I'm speaking about textbooks here, created the illustrations, the examples given in the textbook would be understood by those in the Caribbean who would be using the resource. Another big challenge is the ICT infrastructure. Open education resources are primarily digital, and so they facilitate the seamless use of the resources. To facilitate the seamless use of the resources, reliable internet coverage and sufficient bandwidth is required. Our region continues to lag behind more developed nations in this area, and we still have the notion of the digital divide within individual territories and between several territories. So how then can we address these issues as they impact? Education is one of the major ways in which to address a deficiency in awareness I note very recently there was a coming out of the University of the West Indies at St. Augustine campus, their Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning sent out a notice encouraging academics to sign up for a workshop, or is it a webinar, on open education resources. And this was targeting lecturers and other persons who might be interested in using these. So this is one of the ways in which UE St. Augustine is seeking to educate their constituents. There also needs to be greater, and this is one of the ways as well, speaking more about them, speaking at conferences, presenting more in terms of, in groups such as these and on campuses about what these are and how they might be able to be used sufficiently within, successfully within the institutions. A policy framework is also one that is touted in order to counter the challenges experienced with quality. Moraes says that developing a government policy for open education resources and for templates to be used would be useful. And she also considers that an institutional framework within the actual institution, that would also be needed. In terms of quality, one of the things we as librarians do is apply the CRAP test for every resource that we would suggest to our students. And that CRAP test says, is it current? Is it relevant? Is it authoritative? And what is the purpose for doing this? In terms of resource allocations, we're looking at an investment in time, not only to evaluate the resources that are available freely on the internet at this point in time, but also to create these resources within our institution. We're looking at bringing persons together, librarians, we're looking at bringing administrators, we're looking at bringing ICT experts, we're looking at teaching and learning experts, bringing these together in order to create these resources for our own context, within our own context. So significant allocation in people and time. The initial costs, there will be an initial cost, but remember, with open education resources, we can remix, we can add, we can delete, and so on. So in order to create a robust environment where open education resources are able to operate, we must consider resource allocation. One of the barriers to access is access to education in the region. And this has been touted in so many environments that we know that it has to be true. However, from as early as 2004, when the term open education resources was coined, one of our very own, Stuart Marshall, has been advocating for the use of open education resources in Caribbean, even with the skepticism of his peers. Marshall and Moraes see the adoption of open education resources as a means of providing cost-effective access to higher education for individuals in the dispersed locales of the Caribbean. They contend that the openness movement as a whole, including open education resources, allow for the sharing of scarce resources and minimizes the duplication of efforts. With the cost of educational materials becoming increasingly prohibitive, open education resources, texts, and journals are seen as means for students in the Caribbean to obtain required resources for their studies. And this is a significant challenge. For instance, open textbooks can reduce the average expenditure on educational material by as much as 80%. And I'll give you an anecdote. On Facebook recently, there was a list of 10 things persons who would have gone to UE know about. And among the 10, I think it was number 6, subject to correction, said that you borrow the book from the library and keep it for the whole term because the cost of the fines is cheaper than actually buying it. So the textbooks are among those costs to students which must be considered. So these open educational resources help to reduce the cost of materials to students by as much as 80%, says Maurice. And this cost redounds to the institution, parents, and so on. An added benefit is that it has proven to increase academic achievement and graduation rates, says Colvart, Watson, and Park. The promotion of regional scholarships through open education resources is also a consideration. One of the trials for Caribbean scholars is getting their works published in international journals. Espin et al. Reported that the absence of international representation on editorial boards of journals not only impacts the trajectory of its scholarship, but stymies the growth and direction of research in the global south. Open education resources then can be used to promote and enhance scholarship and regional scholarship and research. Open education resources sit within the wider purview of It sits within the wider purview of the open access movement, and it brings into play the whole discussion of access to information for our people, our students, and access to information for those who would not normally have had access to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wood, for your very interesting presentation on this topic of great importance to us here in the Caribbean. My big takeaway from your presentation is OERs contributing to make education more accessible and equitable. And I think that falls in line with the general gist of the conversation that we have been having since this morning. I am going to move ahead to the second presentation, and then we would just take questions for both presenters at the end of the next presentation, which will be made by Mr. Tashfeen Ahmad, and he will be presenting on Embrace Technologies, Increase Communication. Tashfeen Ahmad expanded his understanding of psychology at Harvard University and joined the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, Jamaica, in May 2013, with many years of international general management experience. He is teaching international business management, management of change, production and operations management, productivity and quality management, and his research interest is in technologies and the future of higher education. Please let's welcome Tashfeen Ahmad.
Thank you very much. Those of us who were listening to the presentation earlier before this session, a Lucian presentation. In that presentation, they made very interesting points over there, trying to say that universities, if they are trying to do their things as they have been doing traditional way, it might be very difficult for them to stay relevant in the future. And there are obvious reasons. They were telling that international universities are going to come in developing countries, and using various technologies, they can take charge of student enrollment and engage them and try to prepare them with degrees which are of international recognition. So in that regard, I'm trying to share some ideas with you guys. I think that universities need to use more and more technologies over there. Either they are administrative roles or teaching roles, whatever they are doing. They need to use technologies to engage their students. And the reason for that is maybe a couple of reasons. For example, these younger students are digital natives now. They are spending most of their time, as they also mentioned in Lucian's presentation, on mobile phones over there. And the traditional way of engaging them, for example, if we want to educate them in a classroom environment, or we want to get them involved in university environment, if we can use some of those technologies, for example, mobile phones, I feel, and there is research which supports that it would be beneficial. We will be able to engage them. So this is what I would be talking about: embrace technology, increase communication and collaboration within university community through administrators, students, and so on. So I would like to start talking about mobile phones first. So there is research which supports that mobile phones help in increasing student interaction, collaboration, engagement, all those type of things. It helps over there. And there is a perception that maybe universities are really not ready to take that type of engagement, especially coming from developing countries. But research indicates that slowly and surely, even even universities from developing countries, they are also trying to think of these methodologies. Of course, they are going to face some hindrances over there. Connectivity is the problem. Infrastructure, university infrastructure can be problem. Those type of things. So what I'm trying to suggest is that universities need to maybe do some things where they can use these type of technologies over there. So for this, first of all, I wanted to really understand that I'm coming from Mona campus, University of the West Indies. So I wanted to understand that how much involved our students are with their mobile phones. Are they really engaged with the mobile phones or not? So for that, I did a pilot study over there. 145 undergrad students completed my surveys. It was a long survey. I plan to publish it in some research journal over there. I'm going to share a couple of insights with you, which will show that students are really involved. Our UV students are really involved with their mobile phone devices. So I asked them questions like, how often do you check your mobile phone for text or voice message every day? Yeah, every day. How many times do you check your phones? And I asked them, for example, when do you really turn off your phone? Do you really turn off your phone, or it stays on all the time? These type of questions I asked. I'm only sharing data for 2 or 3 questions in my presentation over here. And in that sample of 145 students, the age range was 19 to 22 years, and 45% were male and 55% were female students over there. And this is the division of first year, second year, third year students. So in all, there were 145 students which participated in the. Well, more than 145 participated. After looking at the surveys, we said that 145 surveys are valid. Yes. So from that, I want to share some thoughts with you over here. So out of those 145 students, there were 64 students who said that they check their phones every day more than 100 times, yeah? So that is roughly speaking half of the population over there in the pilot project. More than 100 times they are checking their phones for text message, voice message, and so on. So they are very, very much engaged. And this finding is similar as in the studies in developed countries like USA. Over there also, similar type of findings are coming over there. And then another question for which I wanted to share the data with you. When do you turn off your mobile phone? Yeah, that is one of the questions in the survey. So 67% of the students said that we never turn off our phone, and we take it everywhere. We never turn it off. They said we never. Yeah, so there were many questions over there. Do you turn it off, like for example, when you are charging or your battery dies or something? 67% battery don't die all the time. They are over there. So these two questions that I wanted to share. So first, at least half of the students check their phone more than 100 times, and around 70% of the students never turn off their phone, take them everywhere. Yeah, so this really shows us that students are really involved and engaged, at least Mona campus students, undergrad, age range 19 to 22. They are really involved in their phone. So once we have established that to some extent, now we really need to do something about it. We need to use these tools, these smartphones, mobile phones, to reach our students. Either we are lecturers over there or we are administrator over there, because this is a great opportunity for us to increase their engagement and interaction with the university over there. And then the research, if you will look at the research over there, it shows very clearly that using mobile phone text messages, it helps in student learning. I won't go in details over there. I can post the slides on the website, and you can look at it. But essentially, what it is saying that the research confirms that if you are using text messages, mobile phones to reach students, it definitely increases their motivation to maybe come to classes also, and they are more involved with the universities in various ways. Some examples I wanted to maybe show you of some universities which are using these mobile phones, for example, these type of technologies to engage students in different respects, yes? So it's not just learning over there, different aspects they are using. For example, one of the universities we are seeing that they are using to engage their alumni, past students. Now, past students are a big asset for any university. So why don't we, as University of the West Indies, use some text messages over there, voice messages to engage our past students over there? That is one thing which universities are doing. Deadline reminders, notices, universities are doing that, sending them directly, text message over there. So we can think about these. Again, all of these suggestions are based on some pilot study where a big number of university students on Mona campus are very engaged all the time with their phones over there. Security is sometimes an issue over there. Not really a big issue in some ways, but in some ways it is a big issue over there on Mona campus. So for example, emergency alerts, we can use that. Some universities are using that to tell about any type of emergency on campus, any type of notices you want to come to the class, or something is happening over there on the campus. For example, last 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, there were some issues with electricity on Mona campus. So in that type of engagement, students can be reached on their mobile phones and can be alerted over there that this is the situation over there. So universities are using different type of methodologies. And they are also finding that this type of engagement using mobile phones, text messaging, voice message, has a better interaction rate than emails, which which we send to a student, especially in the context that, like for example, UV Mona campus, most of the students don't even want to check their UV email. They prefer that if you reach them on their personal email. So that is again a little glitch which can be filled by looking at these things over there. Quizzes, questions, all different types of things universities are doing. So this is just a point of reflection maybe, that if this is, so this was pilot study, of course, only 145 students over there, but based on my interactions with my students also, I have found that they like mobile phone. In another research which is already published for me in a Emerald journal, where I used mobile phone as a learning tool in my class. The class was a small class, only 25 students, but the findings came out that 90% of the students liked when they were allowed to use mobile phone as a learning tool in their class. For example, I would be teaching anything like, for example, globalization. What are some of the positives of globalization? So before I talk about that, I would ask them, what do you think about globalization, and what are some of the drawbacks or positives of globalization? Use your mobile phones, do some research, and I have found very, very good response rate from the students. They get engaged, they want to talk about it, and of course sometimes they will go on Instagram and WhatsApp and those type of things. So that is one issue. And then internet connectivity in some rooms, some facilities can be issues. So if university can think about these type of things, take care of these glitches over there, I think that these type of technologies, which is not just limited to mobile phone, there are so many other technologies over there. If we can use those, we can definitely increase student engagement, student participation, maybe even able to increase the presence of students in classrooms, because for example, in full-time regular school, that is a big issue. Like if you have 100 students in a class, in most of the classes, only 50 will come over there for one reason or another. So why don't we use some type of mobile engagement to bring them in class, or at least alert them about something, have some communication with them. Of course, a lot of things are required. It is not just the university that they need to provide the infrastructure. The administrators should also be interested in this type of work. This is something which is not part of their job maybe, and lecturers would also want to be motivated to do these type of things. But I feel that as in the Lucian presentation also, they concluded by saying that if we keep on doing the things the way we have been doing in universities, whatever the status quo has been or traditional way of teaching, future will be very difficult for these type of universities. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad, and for your keen attention to time. We have time for a few questions for the speakers, about 10 minutes maximum. Could you just move to a microphone, raise your hand to indicate if you have a question? I'd like to kick off first. And my question doesn't have to be taken first. But certainly from what you have said, I'm very interested in knowing what is the current prevalence of the use of OERs at your campus. What do you think it is? You may not have studied it, but just what is your intuition about it? We have a question over there, second question.
It's really just a suggestion to touch theme, because we hear this morning about the financial challenges of these universities, yeah? And yes, what you're presenting in terms of students using their mobiles and so forth will be very good, because we don't have enough space to hold computers and things to have the size classes you know we have. Yeah? What I'd like for you to do, though, is see if you could drill down to find out what is the possible savings. Because if we're pushing towards this, this is one of the things that they would ask us, how much we can save by doing this. Yeah? That's one of the main things we're going to face with. How much can we save by doing this? I wanted to ask the Elucidad or whatever, the same question. Because yes, they're coming in with a package thing, which is good, it looks good and it's fancy, but when the principal looked at you and said, Stan, you recommend this, how much we can save by doing this? That's the first thing. They're not going to think of, they know that the things are good, you know. But affordability is a big, big problem. I think I have another question, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Sir Stan, for this lovely comment. You are absolutely correct. If we can somehow find what are some of the savings we can make from this type of initiative, that would be great. I would be stopping by your office to take some more suggestions over there. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add to that question on the savings, because sometimes we introduce these technologies, but we have to be mindful of the total cost of ownership, because usually these technologies are free, and to start, we introduce them, and then what do we do about support on the other side? How do we support the technologies? How do we support the students? How do we support the administrators who need to use the technologies? So when you look at that, that also has to be built into this total cost of ownership. And in addition, sometimes they start free, and what we have noticed is that after a couple of years, they become a service that we now have to pay for, and we have to find the funding for it. So I just wanted us to be mindful of that.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Craig, for your comment. I want to know if ask Ms. Wood first of all, and then Mr. Atman, if you would like to.
Can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
You're hearing me now.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Craig, for that comment. Just would like to ask Ms. Wood first, and then Mr. Ahmad, if you'd like to respond to that.
I agree with you that the overall costs must be taken into consideration. And as I pointed out, when we look at costs, we must consider resource allocation, because costs is not always financial. It can be in time, it can be in kind, and in terms of manpower. How do we allocate our resources to make the best of the technology and to make these technologies work for us? And important consideration is to make sure that we're balancing the act, that our investment into creating these is on par or above that which we expect to return. And as I said, the costs of textbooks, the reduction in the textbook can be as much as 80%. So that is an important number that we need to bear in mind.
Yes, Mr. Ahmad.
Yes, and thank you very much for making this comment about the support. You are bang on target. This is exactly how it is if you don't take care of this. I have personal experience of this. I started using a website over there to post my material, teaching material over there. So I was posting it for 2 years, 2.5 years, and after that, for some reason, that business had to go out because they did not have enough means to support, financial means to support their website, and they did not want to charge the customer over there. So they were in this dilemma, so they decided to close their thing, and then it is a hassle to take out all the material you have been posting for 2 years or 2.5 years and find some other alternative for that. So definitely support is a very big consideration in these type of things, and but this can be done. This can be done. Proper research on this if university is also, willing to cooperate on that, if the people who are using the technologies, they have a little foresight, understanding of technologies over there. Maybe talking with some ICT people. I think that also helped me over there in selecting which technologies I should use, because they have a knowledge of, what has been happening in the past decade and so on, so they can make some suggestions over there. So definitely support, and the other pointer about the cost, very valuable pointers. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have another question there.
Okay. Comments and
Could you identify yourself? And
I
your
am going
institute?
to do that. Marjorie Bolero Horton from the Mona campus. Just to say that I think for at Mona, at least I keep seeing coming into my emails the open sources that are there, the resources. I keep seeing from time to time some being sent, notification of sources that we can use. I haven't looked at them because that is another thing. Maybe we should follow up on to see how many persons utilize them, but I know that the campus has been sending us from time to time notifications. Now, I am in the Marketing, Recruitment, and Communications office, and one of my chief role is for the recruiting of undergraduate students, and we do both Caribbean and local. Now, you're talking about technology, and how is it? Because we don't have a lot of money, as Mr. Moore alluded to that, and going on the road takes a lot of money. So we are going to Montego Bay for one trip, and it's 90,000 or something near about that. And the university wants to know the return on investment, which you have to do. How is it that we can utilize the same technologies to help us? We know that we still have to do some face-to-face because our North American persons or British persons are coming, and our people like to interact with people. We are Caribbean, we just don't want to see the technologies. But how can we use that to help us to save the university and to continue our promotion as a university or any institution for that matter? Just to give you an example, when I go out, I usually say to the students, here is my telephone number. It's a WhatsApp number. If you want to call me, you can send me a message at any time, because sometimes you don't see the email, I'm here. And what I find is that students, like we went to the Bahamas, and students from the Bahamas, parents call, students call, so they are using that to connect. So you can always just, it's not, there are no students, they might have applied, they want to find out if their application has gone through, they haven't heard anything, so they send you a little, and because you're on the ground, and I find that is working very well for those that you have given. But how can we, in a bigger way, use that to help us to save? Do you have any suggestions as to how we can use that?
Okay, thank you for your question. If I should repeat, you really would like to know how the OERs could be used to help save and in your marketing activities.
The OER is just to say that the university has been notifying us, but I don't know how many persons use those. But they're there, they make us aware of it, and how more we could use that. So those are there, some of those resources. I mean, you're talking about
your question
cost and
directly-
retention, but I was just making a comment to that. The question is to Mr. Ahmad as to how we can better use to help us to save some funding in our recruitment, because we don't only do recruitment locally, but we do it outside, region and outside. How do we use that? There are suggestions as to any better way that we can do and utilize this source.
Okay, Mr. Ahmad.
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting question. I have a decent understanding of the things you guys are doing in the marketing. I think I came over there, and for one UE on campus initiative, I try to understand what are the things you are doing. So let me first say that you guys are doing great things over there to engage students and tell them about UV, whatever things are. Although students already know, many students already know, but the things you are doing, going out of Kingston, reaching out to schools, and those type of initiatives are wonderful. And this thing which you are mentioning, I think those are very good, right on target type of technologies. For example, you mentioned WhatsApp. So you need to see that what are the technologies which are easily available to the students. So WhatsApp is one thing which is easily available. Other type of social media. For example, I remember that you guys mentioned when I was chatting with your director, I think that you are using Facebook, for example, over there. Maybe Instagram is something which you can use over there. But only thing with those type of social media is that it is easy to create a Facebook page and Instagram and whatnot, but I think that you have to be very responsive on that. Like if a student makes some comment or they want to ask something, then there should be a very quick timeline in which you are going to maybe respond to that. So that is one thing which can be considered. For international students, there are other type of applications. Start with some basic applications, like for example Google Hangout. That is very interesting thing. So just disseminate those type of technologies using your Facebook page, and then see what is happening over there. Collaborating with international universities, that is very interesting thing. Recently I am coming from conferences in Europe and Hong Kong over there, and I try to represent the University of West Indies. People are very interested in sending their students to us over here on Mona campus as an exchange student, but they don't know how to do it. If they can be guided in some way, and we can talk about that if you guys are interested in that how to ensure that our information is there with universities. For example, Hong Kong Baptist University, they showed some interest over there that how to send our students to Jamaica over there. Netherlands, I was over there. Hanze, I taught a course over there, artificial intelligence at Hanze summer school, and they were very interested in sending their students over there. So this type of collaboration can happen. It is very, very, it's not, I don't think it is difficult because of their interest in our country. Everyone want to come to Jamaica for one reason or another. So we can cash on that. It is just that we need to reach the right people, and it is a possibility. But going back to your question, Google Hangout, use that. Skype, use that. Basic technologies, ensure that you post them on Facebook, Instagram, even Snapchat, these type of things. For example, Snapchat, these are the tools which younger audience is using in international markets.
Thank you.
So if we use those type of things, it would be very interesting. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I see we have another question there.
Okay, yes, thank you. What I wanted to mention as we're talking about using the technology in teaching was the fact that I'm endorsing the fact that our students are going in one way and the administrators we've remained fixed, and we are administrators and faculty, so yes, they will not use the university's email, but they want to use their own. But we are insisting that we only communicate to you through this. What we have to do is be a bit more flexible, because if we don't, then the students disengage. So for example, UWI, well, I guess it's all three campuses, but I did it at UWI Mona. UWI offers the postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning for lecturers. When I did that program, because I lecture, the turnout in terms of the numbers was small, and then by the time we got to year one, it was even smaller. Persons are not taking it up, and one module that's taught is teaching with technology. And we were taught how to deliver our lesson using all the social media platforms, including cartoonism, podcasts, webinars, which can be used for the very purpose of recruiting and so on. Instead of fighting with students, I'm studying also on campus, and I'm in a class, and if the lecturer sees the cell phone, it sends them off. They're fighting with the students, put the phone away, and what happens? The class disengages and they go off anyways. So I have found that once I make the cell phone a friend in my class, I immediately get the attention of the students. The same thing they're gonna tell me by raising hand, post it on WhatsApp, post it in Hangout, send me, let's create a Facebook page when you put it there. Just use the tools, the information is the same, but it affects engagement positively, and students actually turn out more for class physically because they are interested in the course. I'm so sorry, Garcia McLennan. Sorry. So I'm just endorsing the fact that if we, as administrators, remain fixed in our perspective, we're going to have to use even the fact that the university offered this course of study free of cost to its faculty and persons are not using it, is an indication that we have to change the way, our own perspective on, because the world is changing, whether or not.
Thank you, Mrs. Greed McLennan from UTech, for your comment. Ms. Wood, would you like to comment on that?
I agree that we need to find ways in which to engage our students, no matter what our role at the institution is. For us as librarians, we've been doing online chat. We have a particular librarian who's our user engagement librarian, and she is very active on the Cave Hill chat, and students are always commenting on her posts. So we know that students will reach us. We need to reach out to students, and we will reach students where they're at. We'll reach results. One of the things that I want to ask in relation to Mrs. Baloran Halton's comment or question was, in terms of how we are measuring, are we using the right matrix? And that is a question not just in terms of our return on investment, but in terms of our output. And it comes into play when we consider creating open education resources. One of the things about open education resources, one of the questions raised about open education resources is the quality, and they haven't gone through the peer review process. And we have said that we have bought the whole gamut, that if it isn't peer review, it's no good. But is that really the case? So that questions the matrix that we use in order to measure quality and to measure output and creativity. I was asked earlier whether or not OERs are used at Cave Hill. I would say that anecdotal and informal evidence suggests that they're very much used by students and the younger generation of lecturers and administrators. Before going to law library, I spent a couple of years at medical library, and again, because of the cost, and now you know my interests, why I'm interested in this particularly, because of the cost of textbooks, what I found is that students would look for the most recent available free textbook, medical text that they can get, and print it. Issues with copyright, issues with access, and relevance, of course. They also would check for these websites, which would have questions and responses to questions that they expect to come up in their exams. You know, so they will be using these in anticipation of what will be done formally.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question over here.
Paula Wellington, John, Yui. You can
Which
hear
campus?
Me? Yui, St. Augustine.
Okay.
Yeah, just some comments. The MOOCs are very good, but you notice now you have to start paying to access a lot of them, like on Coursera. As you were saying, sometimes things are available for free for a while, and then they start charging. Also, even to access some of these things, as you were saying, you need good internet access. So once again, that affects people who are not in good economic circumstances. So they're disadvantaged again. And also, we remember, I think when Mr. Ackman was talking about half the class wouldn't show up. Remember, we have invested in technology already, Blackboard Collaborate, which enables students to engage from outside, from home, they could use their smartphone. So we do have tools, but I don't know how much they're being used. Like Blackboard Collaborate is really not being used a lot, and that was supposed to enhance access. Huh? All over? Oh yes, oh yeah, well, Moodle as well. Because you could have used your smartphone, you could have been in a cafeteria, you could be in a mall, and you could still participate in a class using mobile technology. So I'm also a bit concerned that we have tools and we are not able to get them to be taken up by the lecturers, by the students. You know, we're not really using what we have as fully as we can.
Thank you. Could you please repeat your name?
Paula Wellington John, St. Augustine campus.
Okay, thank you for your comment. I'm going to ask each of the speakers if you could give a very brief response each, starting with Ms. Wood.
One of the things that I have found is that what we think students should be using is not necessarily what they think they should be using. And that came up a couple of times here. In terms of particular platforms and so on, engagement with students, and sometimes there is reluctance, sometimes there is skepticism in terms of using these resources on our part. I find that younger generations are more agile, they're more adaptable, and they're willing to try something to see if it will work for them. We tend not to be so quick on the uptake. So it's a consideration of what we think as opposed to what they know and what they do. What's your last name?
Ahmad.
Mr. Ahmad. I like the fact that he surveyed his students and asked about their use of the mobile phones. And I think perhaps that is what we need to do before we make the investment into these technologies. Sorry, we need to do more of that. I know we're already doing it, but we need to do more of it.
Mr. Ahmad.
Yeah, this is a great point you have made over there, that tools are available over there, and I would agree. And I would link it with the pointer our colleague Garcia made over there, that these tools are there, but anytime you take out a mobile phone as a student in a class, something happens to the lecturer and they don't like it. They don't appreciate that the attention is going towards the mobile phone or any other type of device. So this type of change in attitude, change in mindset maybe has to happen from the lecturer side if it is classroom, and from administrators also, that they need to use these type of technologies to engage their students. Right now, the tools are there, as you mentioned, but the openness towards these type of tools is a little bit lacking. All we need to do is that just ensure that they understand the new students over there, younger audience, they are very much into these type of technologies. And if we can use these technologies, it will engage them, make them a better student also. Yes.
Thank you. From this session, two things that I take away. I'm sure you have many others. One, for us as administrators and the broader universities that we represent, clearly we need to examine the possibilities and see how we can effect some cultural change in terms of use of OERs. And going forward, for the use of OERs and the potential of OERs to factor into the future strategy of our institutions. On behalf of ACHEA 2019, I would like to thank each of our presenters, Ms. Wood and Mr. Ahmad, for your presentations, very interesting and future directed. And of course, thanking you, the audience, for attending this session on open educational resources. Thank you.